This is Cyberpunk Cities, Fiction or Reality by Dami Lee.
Cyberpunk is dark.
True.
Brutal.
True.
Hopeless.
True.
But it's also a really cool way for us to think about what our future could look like.
Also true.
And you
It's
might
sick.
think of it as just fiction, but in the last couple of years, you've seen just how fast things can change in ways that we would have
Bro,
never
that wall
even
city's
been able
stupid.
to guess. Let's try to look at Cyberpunk from an architecture and urban planning point of view to see, is it just fiction, or is there a real connection to our reality?
Ooh, I want to see this.
Are we already dreaming of electric sheep?
Architect's perspective.
A portion of this video is sponsored by NordVPN. Cyberpunk is a subgenre of science fiction, but it focuses on the darker side of technology, often in bleak, dystopian futures. You have a technologically
True.
advanced,
Blade
yet
Runner.
declining society, where people constantly struggle to maintain a sense of self in the face of technology that's becoming so superior. It's typically set in a dark, urbanized, and globalized world with a
Too
gritty
urbanized.
underground subculture with things like cyborgs, virtual reality, AI, and cybernetic implants. Big corporations control everything, and technology is both a
Corporations
lifeline
over
and
governments.
It's what you need to survive, and yet it's the tool that
The
controls
capitalist dream.
Say something nice.
One of the key features of a cyberpunk city is the density and complexity. We have towering skyscrapers, usually overpopulated and polluted. We have labyrinthine streets and alleyways and a vast network of interconnected technologies.
She puts audio so
Basically,
loud.
an urban jungle where people are forced to navigate a complex and dangerous landscape to survive. But at the same time, cyberpunk cities can be places of opportunity and possibility, where
Yup,
the marginalized
anything can happen.
carve out a niche for themselves. And
Ooh,
so,
I haven't
don't think
watched
it's an
Alita
accident
yet.
that the
I should watch
most
Alita.
common recurring cities in cyberpunk are set in cities like Tokyo, LA, Hong Kong, or London. North America, it's the place of hope, the American dream.
New York.
But it's also an icon of capitalism. And Asia, super dense, technologically advanced cities, but there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. But
Facts.
there's another more obvious reason. Cyberpunk emerged in the 80s and 90s, where the US and Japan were at the forefront of technological innovation. We saw the rise of Silicon Valley, as well as the rise of Japan's tech
I didn't know it started
so
in the
these
80s.
areas became
Silicon Valley.
associated with cutting-edge technological development, and so it served as a natural backdrop for these cyberpunk stories.
And it's great and it's cool.
Okay, stop.
What?
In the original Ghost in the Shell, there's only one scene where you can obviously distinguish kids in the environment. Having children in cities is not just important for social stability, economic growth, cultural continuity, but also for urban planning. They bring life and energy to public spaces. They bring spontaneity and play and fun. And in fact, public spaces that are
Not wrong.
designed with kids at the forefront, it can actually lead to a more vibrant space for everyone. Just look at this project, Superkin, in Denmark by Bjarke Engel's architects. Instead of creating
Ooh.
isolated playgrounds for kids, they integrated the play areas within the larger public realm. And by doing that, they made the
More
entire
kids.
area more interactive, more inclusive,
Yeah.
more accessible, and more fun for everyone.
Wait, that's actually good. Why was there a naked kid
The
outside?
absence of children in cyberpunk is very obvious in the design of these cities, and it just speaks to a society
Children are the
that's
workforce.
not only struggling with crime or cost of living, but also a society that has no hope and no vision for the future. And this isn't just fiction. Places like Japan and Korea, they're already experiencing a pretty scary birth decline. And you can actually see how that's already
And there's so
impacting
many
the
old
economy
people in
and
Japan,
the real estate
actually.
market. The problem is obviously pretty complex, and there's a lot of factors that go into it, like the kind of social tolerance to completely shutting yourself off from society. But it could also simply be that the
I haven't hit the hikikomori level yet because I still go out, but there is a part of me that can relate to it.
lifestyles are really demanding, and the long working hours just leave very little time for personal life. That plus the rising cost of living is not really the ideal condition for starting a family. Whatever is the
True,
crux
because
of the
it's
problem,
gritty
if this continues to happen
in a
in the
cyberpunk
next couple of
world.
generations, we're probably going to be seeing what we're seeing in these dystopian cyberpunk worlds.
Cyberpunk worlds are cool.
This is a very iconic scene.
I think cyberpunk worlds are cool because it's very futuristic, but at the same time, it's very primal in a way. Like, we're reduced back to it's every man for himself, and it's a dog eat dog world instead of, modern society where people help each other and all that stuff. I think that's cool.
In both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, the corporations are represented by huge brutalist style buildings that are kind of shaped like Mayan pyramids. At first glance, it kind of looks like the design was optimized for planes. Compared to a traditional tower, these stepped pyramids have a very large landing surface. I think the reference to Mayan pyramids was actually really intentional. These were
Probably.
religious and political structures. They used it for rituals, sacrifices, for observing the stars, and some even had tombs of important rulers. So these corporate towers get an almost religious connotation, which actually makes a lot of sense because this is the place where they create the replicants. But unlike these real Mayan pyramids, the sheer scale and density of these
This is
structures
way
suggests
bigger.
that
This is a
they
mountain.
have zero regard for life on the street. In city planning, we have density limits, the area of the site times the allowable density for that zone. Basically,
I didn't
if
know
the
that.
building's taller, it needs to be slimmer. If it's fatter, then it needs to be shorter. Because the mass of the building, it affects the daylight, the wind, and it affects in creating safe and pleasant spaces for people on the street.
I didn't know that was
So
a
these
thing.
massive structures, they completely dominate the cityscape, and it also reflects the power and control that these corporations have
Huge.
over society.
Like, if you lived in that huge pyramid-ish building, I don't think you'd ever see outside of it.
Later, when you look at Deckard's apartment, you'll see these tiles. These details are actually from Frank Lloyd Wright's Ennis House, which is an example of the textile block house or the Mayan revival house. These
Ooh, what's that?
interlocking
That's
concrete
cool.
forms create a geometric pattern that were inspired by the Mayan pyramids. I don't know
That's
if this
super
was
intricate.
intentional or not, but maybe it's suggesting that these corporations reach all the way into the depths of people's private lives. And fast forward to Blade Runner 2049, you'll see a very similar motif in the tiles at Kay's apartment. So,
But it's
maybe
more-
not a coincidence.
It's simpler
after
though.
all. It really seems that cyberpunk cities have eyes everywhere. There's
Yup.
so many different ways to profile you.
Technologies.
There's cameras and ID devices. Even the structure of a building is designed to create this aura of surveillance. In Blade Runner, the LAPD building is also a building in the brutalist style. It's designed to have a large landing surface for the flying vehicles, and it's almost an inverse pyramid with a wider top.
Wait,
and a
this is the
smaller
Teen
bottom.
Titans Tower, isn't it? It looks like the Teen Titans Tower.
This towering gesture suggests surveillance of overlooking. And when you're on the ground plane, it feels really overwhelming. An IHS study predicted that the number of surveillance cameras worldwide would reach 1 billion by 2021. And that was already 2 years ago. 54%
Yeah.
of the world's
I mean, that makes
CCTV
sense.
cameras are actually located in, can you guess? China, equating to
Ooh, shit, China.
540 million. That means there's
And it's all in the
372
main
cameras per
cities.
1,000 people, given the country's population of 1.46 billion.
That's a
Remember
lot.
Minority Report? That's
Ooh, that
already
one.
kind of happening to China.
Bro, Minority Report was ahead of its
A man
time.
enters a room and tells you a vocal fry. What do you say? Cells.
Cells.
Are
Cells.
you an architect or just a YouTuber? Interlinked.
Interlinked.
Will you cry
Oh, she's
like a
doing
baby if this video doesn't perform well?
Blade Runner thing.
Cells.
Cells.
A muskrat is drowning because he can't swim anymore. What do you do? Interlinked.
Wait. What's a muskrat?
Do you know what a nutria is?
No.
Oh, this is the ad. I think.
Capybaras?
Capybaras are cool.
A beaver? Do you know what a beaver is? Aren't you from Canada? Wait, your data is
Aren't you from
I can't track
Canada?
your location anymore.
That's because I'm using NordVPN to hide my current location. NordVPN provides the best and fastest privacy protection on the planet, so I can stay safe from malware, phishing, and man-in-the-middle attacks while my privacy is protected with next-generation encryption.
If you don't comply, I'm going to geofence all your favorite content.
지금 내 말 안 들었어? 그렇게 안 된다니까 이 바보야. With NordVPN, I can watch my favorite K-dramas while I'm traveling or while I'm at home.
But you just have to make one mistake and we'll find a way to track you down.
If my personal information is leaked on the web for any reason, the dark web monitor is gonna notify me instantly. So, good luck with that.
Okay, so I'm going to talk with my
NordVPN is like
manager about
subscription
this.
based, isn't it?
You hold on and wait there, okay?
Sure. By the way, if you follow the link in my description, you can get 4 extra months off of any 2-year plan. That includes everything that I just mentioned, plus a lot more. Also,
Oh, it is
if you don't like
subscription
it,
based.
there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. You know what? I'm gonna leave now and get back to the video.
Wait, you're so far away from baseline. Interlinked. Cells? Don't leave me alone.
By the way, if you guys are curious about how we made this video, I created a
Oh, it's
booklet that
done?
contains all of our process.
Oh, it's not
And
yet.
if
I
you're
thought
a
it was done.
spoon or a producer of this channel, it's completely free. All the links are in the description.
That's cool. Like the effects is very good.
In both of the Blade Runner movies, there's lots of great examples of what you would call brutalist architecture.
What is a
Brutalism emerged in the
brutalist? Oh, there it is.
1950s. And when Philip K. Dick wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep in 1961, which is the book that Blade Runner was based on, brutalism was thought to be futuristic, ahead of its time. And actually, it was considered kind of radical, especially compared to the smooth, clean, sterile quality of modernism, which came before it. It was even considered
Oh.
a socialist form of architecture. These bare structures, the idea was that they provided
But
a
it's
kind of
crazily
blank canvas
shaped,
that
though.
could be infilled by people's experiences over time. It was the kind of architecture that, instead of saying, "Look at me," it came alive only by involving people. It was democratic, it was social, and it was morally right.
Was it?
Or that was the idea.
No,
Just
there
look
it
at
is.
this. Concrete deteriorates and weathers really badly over time.
Mm-hmm.
Despite these grand social visions, it turns out people don't actually like hanging out in these massive, raw concrete spaces.
There's nothing in it.
So eventually, these buildings became neglected. But the problem is, because these buildings are just so
But they're cool,
massive
though.
and dense with concrete, apparently it would create a huge amount of carbon footprint to demolish it. So, we're stuck with these cold, raw, concrete monsters.
But isn't it cool? It's like
By
a monument.
contrast, this is also another very common scene in CyberPunk. Bright neon streets with buildings covered
In the dark
advertising.
streets.
In most cities, the city planning restricts and controls this type of signage, except for special zones. For example, Times Square, Piccadilly Circus, Shibuya Crossing, or Dundas Square. From a purely capitalistic standpoint, of course, it makes sense to use the facades for advertising, since most buildings,
True.
the facades don't really serve
Well,
a
Cyberpunk
functional purpose.
is
But
very
not
capitalistic.
only does it create visual pollution and light pollution, leading to constant distraction and fatigue in people and any kind of wildlife around it. Not only does it encourage overconsumption, not only does it encourage onto spaces that are supposed to be public spaces, commercializing building facades lead to a loss of identity.
Ooh, wait, why? Why would that lead to loss of identity? I don't see the correlation. What is this? It is very cool.
You know what you say to a soccer player who's hogging the ball and going in circles?
Mm-hmm.
They say he's doing a Venetian. Because that's how people
Bacau.
move through Venice, through the labyrinth and alleys. Venice is one of those places where the city is an integral part of the person's identity. So in Venice, when buildings are being renovated, they cover it up with a tarp with an exact photo of the facade. Because to go
Oh,
months or years without that building, it would be like losing a limb.
It's
Walter
weird
Benjamin once said that
to see.
to dwell is to leave traces. Buildings are supposed to reflect the local flavor or the culture, the history, and it's supposed to be a reflection of the people who live there. So when we cover up the building's facades with ads, it takes away the unique character or the spirit of that place.
okay.
And we
She's
start
explaining
to lose
it.
identity not just in our cities, but also in ourselves.
That makes sense. This is all just
A
ads.
public square is a space that's owned and maintained by the government or a public entity, and it's accessible to everyone. Public squares are considered to be a part of the public domain, and they're governed by laws that
But if you're in a society that's governed by corporations, then everything is like ads.
regulate the use of public spaces. In contrast, a privately owned square is a space that's owned and maintained by a private individual
Oh,
or
there
a
it
company
is.
or an organization. These spaces are typically located on private property, like a shopping mall or a corporate campus. And although they might feel public,
They're
they're
not.
actually only accessible to people who are permitted to enter the property. I talked about skyways in my last video about megacities, and how even though that's how most people get around in the winters, it's not actually a public space. If you
It's
linger
because the
for too
malls
long,
let
or
them
you look like a
let them
unsavory character,
walk
or you're
past
just a
through it.
demographic that's not deemed desirable, they're in their full rights to kick you out.
Yep, and
So
you can't do anything
when
about
our
it.
public spaces start to get taken over by private interests, in the end, they can set the rules. And it might not seem like a big deal until it is.
Yeah, it's
For
not a big
example,
deal until
Zuccotti
everything's
Park,
owned by
or Liberty
someone.
Plaza Park in New York City is a privately owned public space. And in 2011, it was a site of Occupy Wall Street where protesters camped out for several weeks for a peaceful protest. But in November 2011, the protesters were evicted, although it was in their full right to free speech and assembly, because the owner of the space, Brookfield Properties,
Didn't want them there.
allegedly complained to the city about them being there.
Yeah. I mean, I own the place. If I was,
Abolish all
I'd do the same.
forms of rent control. Abolish
If I own it.
all forms of social and affordable housing. Privatize all streets, squares, public spaces, and parks, whole urban districts. These are not the government mandates of a cyberpunk movie. This is directly pulled from the 8-point manifesto proposed by a prominent partner at Zaha Hadid
What?
Architects, one of the most well-known architecture practices in the world. When I asked ChatGPT, my new best friend, on his thoughts on cyberpunk and its depiction of corporate dominance, it said, although cyberpunk movies can be a source of inspiration, caution, or critique, they should not be taken as prescription of the future. I beg to differ. Commercial interests are blending so seamlessly into our lives, and as technology gets better
True.
and better every year, and as we rely on them more and more, we are giving away control over our privacy, over our identity, even over our own thoughts.
And to be
While
fair,
it's
there's kind of
impossible to
nothing we can
predict
do
the
about it.
future, I think we're at a critical time right now. How we address these challenges and the choices that we make, it could really change the trajectory of our future. That's why it's so important that we stay informed, that we advocate for change, that we get involved in our communities, and we also consume responsibly. And that's the only
True,
way we
consume
can avoid
responsibly.
a dystopian future and pave the way for a more equitable and promising society. Because in the end, dystopian dreams, they are reflections of our current fears.
Blade Runner sounds much
We don't want
better than
to
two androids
end
dream
up
of
there,
electric
even though I
sheep.
think it's cool.
Do you agree?
I'd probably
Sales?
be dead
Is
by
this
then.
video getting a little bit too long? Sales? I love you guys. Please don't leave me alone here. I just want to be interlinked. If you are still watching, maybe
Yeah, I'm
consider
still watching.
subscribing
I'm
and like the video.
wondering what's gonna happen
Interlinked.
here.
Right, and camera rolling.
Oh, that's it.
Slate.
The green screen technology. Bro, the amount of production value in this video is insane. I just want to say that. I'm going to subscribe and like the video because it's really good. And also it's pretty good insight. Yeah, this is cool. In my head, conceptually, a cyberpunk city society would be cool. It would be amazing. But when you include reality of living in a cyberpunk city, how it's gritty, how it basically breaking the rules is basically you're like a robot by then. Either you're a criminal or you're a robot, I think. And it sucks. So, yeah. That's food for thought. But I think it's an extremely good subject for fictional works. And I think that's why so many writers use the idea of a cyberpunk city. Very nice.